three-time Super Bowl champion Mark Schlereth back here on the Rich Eisen Show. Perfect guest for a day like today. Good to see you, Mark. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Rich. How are you, my friend?
I'm fine. Your impression of the line play last night, Mark Schlereth?
Well, one thing that doesn't go in and out of vogue, doesn't go in and out of style. You know, I get this all the time on social media. Hey, you old head, the game has changed. The game. Now, listen, if you whoop that ass up front, you're going to win a lot of football games. And that ass got whooped up front. The Philadelphia Eagles laid in and laid the wood to the Kansas City Chiefs on both sides of the ball. And I don't want to hear about, well, Saquon, they held Saquon. He only had 2.3 yards per carry. Man, kudos to the coaching staff. Kudos to Kellen Moore for calling the game, because 25 carries, averaging 2.3 yards per carry. Most offensive coordinators in that situation, they can't wait to give up on the run. They can't wait to stop running the football. They can't wait to throw it 50 times a game. And yet they stayed true to it. 25 carries, only 57 yards. Saquon caught the ball out of the backfield. But what I love about Saquon, does the dirty work when the ball's not in his hand, had a couple of big-time blitz pickups, and then that defensive line, Rich, was something special. Just absolutely collapse in the pocket, the game's attacking protections, and this is something we've seen Spags do a lot in Kansas City, attack protections. Well, we saw it with Vic Fangio, knowing exactly where the slide is going, knowing exactly where they're trying to protect, and coming from the opposite side and just collapsing that protection. It was just a magnificent job by the Philadelphia Eagles. And like I said, they whooped that ass.
Well, when you are watching a game and obviously have that keen sense of what to look at up front, when did you realize this thing was going to be sliding away from the Chiefs? When did that finally dawn on you where you're like, oh, I don't know if they have the personnel here to deal with what's coming at them right now, Mark?
Well, you know, one of my keys to the game, I had two keys to the game. One was attempts by Saquon, not yardage, but attempts.
Okay.
And they were able to do that because it sets up your play action, gives you an opportunity for your quarterback to scramble, does all those things, give you one-on-one access to the outside. Anytime you get a lot of attempts and you're running the ball effectively, not for a lot of yards per carry, but effectively, you're going to get a lot of one-on-one outside kind of access throws. So they were able to do that during the course of that game. The other thing on the defensive side of the ball that I thought was going to be really important, not just, you know, the pressure and all those things that we talk about all the time, but it was really, to me, about creating an opportunity where you actually invited Kansas City to run the football. Just invite them to run it, because it's hubris. And we go back to the Super Bowl against Tampa Bay, where they could have run it for 7-8 yards a carry, and they just chose not to. And in that particular game, they got obviously the score was lopsided early, but that's not an excuse. You know, I always think about when you break the huddle, what slows down a pass rush? Well, running the ball slows down a pass rush, right? Hey, set a guy up, trap him inside, let him rush up the field like he's going to sack the quarterback, go hit him in the teeth. Like, there's a couple of things that you can do to really slow and mitigate that pass rush. And the Chiefs never, ever did it. They never adjusted. They never had another plan. Mahomes was under duress all night, and it was one of those games where Mahomes was sped up in the pocket. So you're trying to get through progression so fast because the pass rush is so fierce that you're ready to throw the ball before the receivers come out of their breaks. And then everything in the passing game is off. And we saw that all night long. It was completely off throughout the entirety of the night. And this Philadelphia Eagles team, just, boy, I tell you what, that was a clinic. They were dominant.
Mark Schlereth here on the Rich Eisen Show. And I know you're absolutely right. You know, line play, that's it. And the trenches. And clearly we can talk about weaponry in the quarterback-driven league. But that goes all out the window if it can't be protected. And so I know Howie Roseman's all about the line. You know, let's get these big 360-pound dudes who can move. Let's find them. Or 400-pound guys and have them lose weight like Mekhi Becton and move them, right? And then just keep drafting these kids from Georgia or all these other kids, and let's get BG back out there. the old guys, and let's go hunt. And I'm just wondering here, like, is this a blueprint just in general? Or do you think that maybe the rest of the AFC will start looking at this and go, this is the way that we're beating Patrick Mahomes. We're going to get to the Super Bowl. To heck with this. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a blueprint. There's no question, but it's one that's very hard,
Why?
to put together.
Why?
Well, it's just because they have been doing it for a while. They've been building their team this way for a while. So they're just adding to the pieces. I'll give you a great example.
Sure.
So a couple of years ago, the Philadelphia Eagles had the best offensive line in football. And you know what they did? They had they had Jason Kelce, who is an all-pro Hall of Fame center, right? And you know what they did in his heyday? And he's still got, he's still playing at a really high level. They draft a guy named Cam Jurgens in the second round out of Nebraska. Did they need him? No, they didn't. Jason was still going to play another 3 or 4 years. But what did they do? They drafted him anyhow. They added to a position of strength. They ended up having him play guard, having him get tutored by Jason Kelce, and then he moves into center seamlessly and is an all-pro type of player at that position. And so, a lot of teams suffer because they neglect positions of strength. And they say, hey, that's a position of strength. Let's go chase this receiver. Let's go chase that guy. Oh, man, we need more weapons. We need weapons. Let's chase. Let's do this. You know what? The Philadelphia Eagles go, no. Let's take care of the line of scrimmage. Let's dominate the line of scrimmage. And let's add to our line of scrimmage health. And you know what? When guys get hurt or guys get, guys retire or whatever the case may be, the next dude is ready to step up, and he's been developed over a couple of years. He's just not thrown into the fire. And so it's easy to say, hey, there's the blueprint, but it's really hard for teams to actually go about doing it because they get enamored by workouts. They get enamored by 40 times. They get enamored by things that don't matter. And that's why the draft, and that's why, the procurement of your football team is such a difficult thing. And it takes discipline and it takes understanding to actually, attack it that way. And so a lot of teams will see it as a blueprint, but a lot of teams, most teams don't have the intestinal fortitude to actually go out and execute it.
Well, it seems like the Ravens could, or they are, right? I mean, so give me the teams that are already. I mean, we could go down the list here. Obviously, Bills within the own division. Harbaugh, the Jim, is somebody who's going to be hitting the head. That's the first thing he did with having Rashawn Slater is go ahead and and take Alt 5th overall anyway. Right. So that's what I'm trying to identify the AFC teams that can look at what the Eagles did and say, let's do this ourselves here, or let's build the same damn thing. We're already there, or we're on our way. Like, give me some ideas here.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, you're talking about, like, obviously what the Eagles were able to do, and they lost some guys, but Sweat was there, and you mentioned BG Graham was there, and then they infused that, young talent on the inside and all those different things. But I'm with you with the Chargers. That makes sense to me. Like, the Chargers understand that. Jim Harbaugh understands that.
Your guy Peyton in the Broncos, right? I mean, you already got the defensive side of the ball going in that direction. You got the defensive player of the year cutting off half the field too, right? I mean,
and then you just got to make sure that you understand, like, where we want to go and be right. And one thing about Sean Payton, I will say this: Sean Payton historically has done a really good job of identifying with his other people, George Payton over there as a GM, but identifying kind of what they want, what kind of player they want. I think that's another thing, Rich, that's so important about building a team. It's also understanding. It's like San Francisco does a great job of understanding what they want at the linebacker position. And then everybody they go after and draft, they can all run. They're all kind of built the same way. They're all like, hey, man, here's the prototypical guy, right? And they fill that in, and every guy looks the same, whether it's Alshire when he was there, whether it's Greenlaw, it's all those guys kind of look and have that same athletic trait and that same athletic ability. I think that's one of the things to really understand what we are, what we want at each individual position. And then we go after that and plug in football players. I always say this about the draft and about, free agency in general, is that football football is really hard for athletes. It's easy for football players. And the problem with a lot of teams in the draft is they get enamored by athletes. And, and I'm fascinated by football players, and it's easy to tell the difference on film.
I love conversations like this here. I got Mark Schlereth for a few more minutes here on the Rich Eisen Show. And I guess let's go down the road here, too, with the Eagles. This is sustainable, right? I mean, like, they're young. Jalen Hurts is going to be 27 on day one, snap one, on the first Thursday night of the season at the banner raise in Philadelphia. Saquon is emerging from this season healthy into the offseason. All those guys up front who are dominating, none of them other than BG are old heads, right? I mean, so those kids on the back end, I mean, holy crap, Mark, what do you think? Is this a potential repeat customer? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, right now they've got the best odds to repeat, to be back to the Super Bowl, so they've got the best odds. But yeah, I think all those things you said are true. They're physically, they're a dominant football team. They've got a few guys they have to address, but the bottom line is they're young, they're physical, and you know what? And I trust the way they've been built. I tell you, man, I was watching the NFC Championship game, and in the NFC Championship game, Cam Jurgens has a back injury,
That's
right?
Right. Yes. Oh, yes.
And so Cam Jurgens is like, oh, I can't go, man. I gotta sit. So they slide
Dickinson.
They slide Landon Dickerson inside.
Yeah, Dickerson.
And then they bring somebody off the bench I'd never even heard of, Rich. And I'm watching the film. I'm like, damn, this guy's dispensing justice. I don't even know who he is.
Yeah.
And like, that's how they're built. And so, I trust that they've got defensive linemen chomping at the bit, other linebackers chomping at the bit. Come on, man. They lost some guys along the way at the linebacker position. Everybody just stepped in and played their butts off. Nakobe Dean goes down, right? They had a couple other injuries along the way. And I tell you what, they've been exceptionally well coached. Here's the other thing.
Yes.
It was interesting in Miami, how two teams are built differently. In Philadelphia, it's all about the defensive and offensive lines, right? It's all about controlling line of scrimmage. In Philadelphia, where do you spend all your assets? Hey, Robert Hunt, one of the best guards in football. Hey, we don't want to pay him. He goes to Carolina, but we'll pay all these wide receivers, right? Because it's all about the weaponry. And where are these two teams? And, oh, by the way, speaking of Miami, didn't Vic Fangio get dumped by Miami because, he's too old and he doesn't relate to today's younger player? Maybe he just doesn't relate to guys who don't want to be great football players. Maybe he doesn't relate to guys that, want to go down to South Beach, because it looked like he related to those defensive players and those young defensive players the Philadelphia Eagles had, as DeJean was taking one to the house and Mitchell was playing his ass off. So I don't know. Maybe it's the area of the country that you play in.
Yeah, and it looks like maybe Sirianni's got his Spags, right? I mean, and in the same way that Reed has his Spags, Sirianni's got his Fangio now, and I know that Kellen Moore's going to probably, I don't know, maybe if you listen hard enough, that's Jeff Lurie telling Kellen Moore to kind of McDaniels his way out of New Orleans, and maybe Ben Johnson his way back to stay the OC. I don't know, because run it back is what Sirianni said. I know Kellen Moore's got probably bigger jobs on his mind potentially. I don't know, but right? I mean, because this is there for the taking. It kind of feels that way.
Yeah, it definitely feels like you've got a chance to run it back. And I understand there's only 32 head coaching jobs in the National Football League, and they're all big jobs and they're all good jobs because there's only 32 of them.
Right.
But 100%. Here's the other thing that's impressive. I don't think we give Sirianni enough credit for what he has been able to do there. I mean, think about this: the humility it takes to sit there in your first year and go, you know what? We're 2-5, and I'm not doing a very good job of calling plays. Even though I'm game planning and doing all that stuff, I'm going to turn that play calling over to Steichen and let him call plays and become the CEO of this football team and manage the entirety of the football team. And, to lose coordinators, Jonathan Gannon goes to Arizona. Let me go get Fangio. Hey, man, it's one coordinator to another coordinator, to now Kellen Moore. Oh, by the way, Kellen Moore has been known as a passing coordinator type of guy in his time in this league. Hey, you know what? That's not how we're built. We're going to run the snot out of the ball. So I want you to morph into this type of play caller, right? I want you to morph into, a guy that we're only averaging 2.3 yards per carry, but you still give it to the back 25 times. It takes a certain guy with a certain intestinal fortitude and an ability to manage people and to develop relationships and do all those things. And I think Nick Sirianni has done a hell of a job coaching. And so, I just want to give that guy the credit that he probably deserves and doesn't get very often.
Yeah, let me add on to that here, Mark, because we forget that when Sirianni took the gig, it was after that weird final game of Doug Peterson's stay where Hurts, after getting the job reluctantly over Carson Wentz, gets yanked in the last game of the season, benched for Nate Sudfeld because they wanted to see what they had in Sudfeld or whatever that was. I don't know what the hell was going on behind the scenes, but Sirianni came in and full-throated supported Jalen Hurts. Remember, he wore like a Jalen Hurts T-shirt and full-throated said, "This is the guy." And now look at them. They've been to 2 Super Bowls together, and Hurts is the Super Bowl MVP. And that doesn't happen without whatever Sirianni was saying behind the scenes or kind of. And I know their relationship has a lot of question marks about it since then, but we are here where we are because of whatever the hell was going on back then. I don't know. I'd love to know.
Rich, every guy, they talked about the unity of that team and how connected they are. And Sirianni talked about, it's like all 53 guys together and all the things that he said. And I've been in that facility a bunch. I've done a bunch of Philly games over the last several years.
Yeah.
And there is, every time I go in there, man, Sirianni's got, a Jalen Hurts T-shirt on or an O-line T-shirt on that he makes for the team, right? Based upon the way they played or whatever. And it's like this big thing. And then other guys are making T-shirts, like they're all wearing each other's. They're all like their biggest fan club. And I just think there's so much about the atmosphere and so much about the leadership of men and so much about the relational aspect of this game that you have to have. And I always say this, the key to championships is sacrifice and understanding that I can't have success individual unless we have success together as a group. And great things happen when you don't care who gets the credit. And the only way you can win a championship, in my mind, is when you can be sacrificial, when you can put others ahead of yourself. And I think the Philadelphia Eagles, this run, they've displayed that exceptionally well. And it's really, to me, it's really a cool thing to see.
Last one for you, Mark, before I let you go, since you were one of the guys who blocked for Terrell Davis in what was, and as many parts in this world, this considered the greatest single season by a running back ever in terms of the yards gained and in terms of winning it all and in terms of being a 2,000-yard rusher. And, I know Saquon didn't win Super Bowl MVP, but do you think this is the greatest single season by a running back ever, what we just saw, Mark?
Yeah, I think it is obviously from a running yardage total, but also just the impact that guy made on his football team. Man, there are guys, Rich, in a locker room that are connective tissue. They're just connective tissue. And in a locker room, it's not segregated, but it is compartmentalized. There are times where I might not bump into a DB for 2 months where I don't ever talk to a guy or really see a guy or connect with a guy. And then there are certain guys within a locker room that just are that connective tissue that connect the defense to the offense, the special teams to, the offense or the defense. And I feel like Saquon is that guy. And I will tell you, I talked about celebrating others' success like it's your own. And I think that is so important. And I'll go back all the way back to, was it the NFC Championship game where Saquon is out and Shipley busts one for about 70 yards. And you know who the first guy on that field off the sideline was celebrating Shipley like he just did it? Was Saquon. He comes screaming off the sideline to jump into his arms and celebrate that long run. And I was like, man, that's special. A lot of guys in that situation are sitting over on the bench, thinking about what a great game they had and about the 60-yarder they took off on the first run and not even paying attention. And he's still out of the game. The game's a wrap. They're up. They've scored 55 points on Washington. And, man, he's dialed into that game like he was playing. And he sees his backup, Shipley, take one for, 70 yards. And he can't wait to jump off the sideline and sprint onto the field to celebrate the guy. Like, that stuff is special, and it matters. And we saw it last night.
Was TD that guy for you? Was he that connective tissue guy in that season that we're talking about him, Saquon potentially eclipsing here?
TD was connective in that we all wanted that record for TD so much, and he's one of the great people. He's just one of the great people. You know TD well.
Yes.
So he's just one of the great people you will ever meet in your entire life. But there's a couple guys that connected the locker room. Like Keith Burns was one of the best connective tissue guys. He was a special teams player for us. I'm not saying that TD wasn't connective tissue that way, but TD, we all rallied around TD because we wanted to see one of the greatest humans on the planet have 2,000 yards. We wanted to see that stuff happen for TD.
You're the best, Mark. Thanks for doing this. Greatly appreciate it. Look for more of my calls and Zooms and all that stuff and texts during the combine draft and all that good stuff.
Anytime, Rich, you know it.
You're the best, man. You got it. Stinking Truth Podcast with Mark Schlereth. That's Mark Schlereth, 3-time Super Bowl champ. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.